invited us to their homes, and we always look forward to visiting them. They took us to the mall and other places. They were always fascinated when they saw us dressed in our local Nigerian attire, which we occasionally did when we went to the city center on weekends. A crowd of white children would flock after us, attempting to touch our skin, and generally flabbergasted to be seeing black people in Plymouth. The adults love our attires and would ask if they could touch them. Frankly speaking, I suppose we must have looked like masquerades to them. As a child, I grew up using native chewing stick to brush my teeth. They are effective for keeping the teeth and mouth clean. So naturally, I traveled to Plymouth with a big bunch of chewing stick. Each morning, I used my chewing stick to brush. I had observed that some of the white boys had poor hygiene. Brushing their teeth was not important to them, and they would usually start eating in the morning without doing so. Some of them had allowed their teeth to get seriously discolored. This thing for one of us. They always looked at my teeth and complimented them. "You have lovely teeth, Greg." Some of them would say. Soon, they began to ask for my chewing stick. They had concluded that it was the secret to my much admired set of teeth. I was often happy to share my chewing stick with them. They were so fascinated by it that they would chew on it from morning to night, even in class. Plymouth is so windy and cold that at one time I thought I was going to freeze to death. On one occasion, I looked through the window of our hostel, 9th floor room, and noticed our building was swaying due to the powerful wind blowing. I was scared, believing that the building was collapsing. I ran out of the room and did not wait to use the lift, and took off down the stairs in terror. I was running for my dear life. When I got to the foyer downstairs, I shouted, "The building is falling!" The porter said, "Calm down. Greg, what is the problem?" When I explained what I noticed, he laughed and told me there was nothing to worry about. I was shocked by his calmness. I went back up and noticed that the white boys were not flinching. I said, "Hey guys, the building seems to be moving." They said the building needed to do that because it would come down if it resisted the wind. The building was designed to move like that to accommodate Plymouth's windy nature. Our academic calendar was structured for maritime studies. We did basic marine engineering and engineering-related studies, subjects like physics and basic naval architecture. It was marine bias during the initial weeks because we had to do seamanship. We went sailing with sailboats as part of the practicals. The professional academic qualification certificate was an equivalent of an OND. We, the two cadets from Nigeria, spent a lot of time teaching white boys the general subjects. We had arrived in Plymouth after finishing our HSC in Nigeria, and we were both 21 years old when we got to UK. So we were academically ahead of the rest. Most of the white students had just left school and were still green, mostly around 16 and 17. However, I have to say that when it came to technical drawing, practical marine engineering in the workshop, the use of lathe machines, mining machines, and shaping machines, we struggled. In those days, the technical drawing needed a whiteboard and a T-square to draw 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions of things. Before we Nigerians could finish marking the edge of the paper, our white boys had finished the whole drawing. The background we were coming from at that time was not to our advantage. Our schoolwork was theoretical right from day one. While they learned technical drawing early, attending workshop and the likes as part of their schoolwork. In general, we did not struggle much academically, but the more technical aspects proved tough for us. There were cadet captains in the school who were like prefects. Though the student body was a youthful population, everyone was treated like an adult. The school population profiled people from different countries, so it was vastly multicultural. Most of the white boys had incredible sports regimes. Some of them, who came from Scotland, had motorcycles and used to travel to Scotland every weekend with their motorcycles, usually in the winter. They did a lot of incredible things, and they were nice and friendly. Our lecturers were majorly about 70% ex-seafarers and ex-naval personnel. And you could see it from the manner of approach to lecturing. They always refer to likely encounters and occurrence at seas. So the teachings were beyond theoretical. Our head of department then was a marine engineer, Mr. Bill Findlay, whom I stayed in touch with until a few years ago. The United Kingdom in the 1970s. The United Kingdom has always been an organized and orderly nation in the 1970s. Like in previous years and even today, their politics was matured and they respected the result of their election. Political campaigns were very vigorous for both principal parties, the Labour and the Conservative parties. Those two have always been in power. Before I got to Plymouth, Harold Wilson had served as the British Prime Minister under the Labour Party, which had won the 1964 general election with a narrow majority of 4 seats. The victory made him the youngest person to hold the office since Lord Rosebery 70 years earlier. That tenure for Wilson ended in 1970. In 1974, he returned as Prime Minister. Remarkably, one of the key issues he had to address then was a referendum on British membership of the European Community, EC. His Labour Party had pledged in its February 1974 manifesto to renegotiate British accession to the EC and then consult the public in a referendum to whether Britain should stay in on the new term. It is interesting that decades later, the issue has remained on British politics front burner, and today, Britain has finally exited the EU. Wilson came into government the second time during a troubled period for the British economy due to a global recession and high inflation. The 1973 oil crisis had stayed and played more than a little part in that. But the United Kingdom economic challenge did not manifest in ways that suggested poverty, lack, or suffering among the masses, like it often does in Africa. In my young eyes, and considering my poor background, the British economy looked fine. Infrastructure was superb, and everything worked. I observed they had decentralized governments well. Transportation and traffic issues were managed from Wales, for instance. Some other things were managed in Newcastle or Bristol or Britain. Decentralization made things less congested in London, the capital city. The Department for Transport, DFT, it was that supervised all things maritime in the UK. There is also the Merchant Navy Training Board, MNTB, which is responsible for ensuring the standards of training and certification for all maritime institutions in the UK, and ensuring that all maritime organizations involved in human capacity development operate under a regulated standard. For the whole country, the examination was centralized at identified centers. The National Health Insurance keyed into the National Health Plan. Shell never failed at paying the necessary insurance dues to ensure we had adequate insurance and healthcare cover. This gave us access to medical facilities anywhere within the UK. Coping with homesickness. When I got to Plymouth, I began to earn a monthly salary of €33. It was a lot of money because everything was taken care of by Share BP. I did not need to touch the money and could afford to send some of it home to support my family. The money was usually beneficial and brought some joy to them as they expressed it through the letters they wrote to me. I would often write a letter and post it to my parents, who would receive it after a month and a half. They would write back, and it would take the same time frame for me to receive their letter. It was a slow process, but it was the norm. I missed my family a lot and was often homesick. When I was leaving Nigeria, my dad and mom bought me a lot of audio cassettes of King Sunny Ade, Chief Ebenezer Obey, and Sir Victor Uwaifo. Whenever I felt homesick, I played them to remember and feel Nigeria, but that only gave me temporary relief. Sometimes I would cry because I miss home. It was tough. Extra work and fun. I did extra work to get extra money. There was a particular brewery in London where I went to wash bottles during my holiday period. The brewery paid me £3 for 6 hours of work. That was a lot of money then. Within a year, I had saved enough to buy myself a Morris 1100 saloon car that cost me €110. There was an institution called Royal Navy Engineering College in Manadon, some 6 miles from Plymouth. Bode George, who later became a prominent naval and political figure in Nigeria, used to be in that college. He was a lieutenant in the Navy then. He had joined the Navy as soon as he graduated from the University of Lagos. Naval officers were sent to the Royal Navy College from Nigeria. Other Nigerians there were Toye Shode, who later became a governor of Oyo State, and Mohammed Lawa, who later became Kwara State governor. Others were Felix Ebon, my Edo College guardian, Ademoroti, Hussaini, Okmanachi, and Badejoko, to name a few. We used to hang out together and shared a lot of fun at weekends. Chapter 8. Life in Liverpool and Living Shares. Our lives are often in segments or phases, with each phase having someone, a group of people, an experience, or a place, triggering events that prepare us for the next chapter of our lives. I had no idea what awaited me at Liverpool as my time there approached. But perhaps that was a good thing, because knowing would have taken away the misery and excitement of the fun, lessons, and joy the city offered me. Liverpool was going to change my life, but I had no clue how much it would. My studies at the Residential Nautical College, School of Maritime Studies, Portland Square, Plymouth, earned me an ordinary national degree, OND, in marine engineering. It was 2 years of studies plus 1 full year at sea, traveling on share ship. After the 1 year at sea, I headed for the Riverdale College of Technology at Liverpool. Riverdale's I enrolled for a 1-year program to earn an OND endorsement in marine engineering, the equivalent of a higher national degree, at the end of which I completed my cadetship and promoted to an engineering officer. My 1 year at Riverdale College of Technology in Liverpool was much more than a study year. It was a year we rocked. Yes, we studied, but boy did we have fun. I got involved in the activities of the Nigerian community in Liverpool. The Nigerian National Shipping Line had their operational headquarters in Liverpool, which attracted a number of Nigerians in the maritime industry to the city. There were also a good number of Nigerians, seafarers, and Nigerians from World War II who had settled and married in Liverpool. As a result, the city had a significant number of people of color, many of whom were multiracial. With this population dynamics, certain social problems began to fester because, sadly to note, a considerable mass of the children were from mixed marriages, could not be bothered to take advantages of the available educational opportunities, as can be imagined. This led to many of them getting involved in drugs, hooliganism, and other social vices. Hence, to the average security agent in Liverpool, the black or colored signified trouble, and they were often profiled and stigmatized accordingly. The good thing, however, was that there were also a lot of Nigerians adding value to the society in their own way. I was at various times the secretary of the Nigerian Student Union in Liverpool. We also had at that time Igbo Club, Yoruba Club, and Somalian Club. In addition, there was a Nigerian center in the city. With this social milieu, I felt closer to home in Liverpool as a Nigerian than I did at Plymouth, where I was baptized into the UK society. Riverdale's College of Technology was a non-residential institution, so we all had to live in apartments in town, and from there, shuttle to school. In Liverpool, there was more than enough social distraction to relax with after a day work at school. Virtually every evening, from about 8 p.m., we would head out to the pub. The first port of call was usually the Igbo Club, which was always fun. After hanging out with the folks there till about 10 p.m., we would proceed to the Yoruba Club. Right about midnight, the merriment would move from the Yoruba Club to the Timepiece. Timepiece is the elite legendary nightclub in Liverpool, owned by a white gentleman, Raw Carrington. Was the only club in the city that played black music at the time. The music was vibrant and exquisite because resident DJ Liz Spain introduced the black American sound, soul, reggae, and funk. Liverpool youth soaked it all in, and in essence, the club helped shape the cultural identity of a generation of black youths in the city. The Timepiece was a melting pot. And as most of us young Nigerian seafarer trooped to the all-nighters, just like many people from Scotland, London, and Europe, etc., the timepiece was not just any other nightclub. It was a core part of Liverpool's social fabric. Timepiece generally closed at 3 a.m. and would once more move base, winding up the night at the Nigerian Center that was alive until 5 a.m. By the time we got home at dawn, all we were able to do was shower and eat something before heading out to school, where we struggled to stay awake all day. Without mincing words, Liverpool was fun, and it was also football. Although I'm not a huge fan of football, the influence and importance of the game on the city was easily palpable. Liverpool FC and Everton were major rivals that split football fans in the city into two camps. Notably was the Merseyside, in which both clubs' side played matches each season. The Merseyside derby is the longest-running top-flight derby in the whole of England, having been played since the 1962 to 3 seasons. It has always been a massive football event in the city, and fans hold nothing back when throwing jigs at the rival club. While in Liverpool, I bought an 8-6-cylinder Ford Ventura car, which I thought was a good buy at £80 until I realized she was a free fuel guzzler. The only way I could run and maintain the car was to use her as a mini cab in the evening. This became a veritable source of additional income. It also swelled the amount of money sent home to support the family. Money matters, and my first house. Let me share the experiences of how I bought my first house in Liverpool. I am glad that early in life, I developed a strong financial prudence that augured well for me in the future. Having grown up with little, I choose to be content, remain level-headed, expenses-wise, and ensure my appetite for spending did not grow to become voracious. This allowed me to save significantly, such that during my time at sea, between 1976 and 1977, I saved some significant amount of money. After I had saved up to €1,500, which was quite some money then, a friend of mine, Nnamdi Emodi, now late, took me to one Mr. Chidi Ofome, a Nigerian in Liverpool, who owned a thriving accounting firm and was active in the real estate business. Chidi's secretary was a pretty white girl whose efficiency at organizing gave his accounting firm the smart professional look. When Nnamdi and I got to Chidi's office, his efficient secretary greeted us with a smile and led us to his office. Chidi is an energetic, charismatic, and intelligent man. As we stepped into Chidi's office, he rose from his seat, walked towards us with a smile on his face, and welcomed us. Perhaps I was the one new to him. He turned his attention on me with a nearly permanent grin. Oh, was it because of my look? I was skinny and used to have an afro hairstyle back then. Chidi, with his constant grin, asked, "Who is this fine young man?" His question directed at Nnamdi, who responded, "He's a share scholar looking for a flat to rent, and he knows you have flats in Liverpool." "Ah, no problem. But first, let's go out for lunch," Chidi eagerly exclaimed. I was surprised and delighted at the same time because I was hungry. Chidi owned a nice Mercedes-Benz car. Only a few black could afford such luxury in Liverpool back then, and that was our ride to lunch. On the way, he stopped to pick up 2 of his friends, who were Greeks. When we got to the restaurants, he treated us to a sumptuous lunch. We ordered our choice of drinks, and our host took care of the bill. After he finished, he said, "Come on, guys, let me show you a couple of places and see if you like any of them." He took us to a few of his flats, gave us tours, and finally drove us back to his office, where he discussed the cost. I could not help but admire his human relations skills and wonder if it was the reason for his apparent success in the accounting and real estate business. Who would have experienced what I just did and would not decide to rent or buy from this charming man? After explaining the rental cost, Chidi looked at me and asked, "How much do you have?" I said, "I've been able to save about 1,500 euro. I don't know what your flat will cost for a year." Chidi was visibly surprised and impressed. "I like you, young man, I do. I did not save that much money when I was your age. With 1,500 euro, I will get you your own house. A mortgage is the trick," Chidi said. I did not understand how mortgage worked at that time. I will work with you to identify a property and look for who will provide the mortgage for you. Your money will serve as an equity, and the mortgage will help you own your own house," Chidi further explained. It sounded like a dream to me. Could I really own a house? I was shocked. Who would have thought this poor Benin boy could own a house in a white man land? Without much ado, Chidi took us to a property, 9 Edge Grove, off Prescott Road, Liverpool, L7. It was a standalone, one-story building in a corner plot. He took us round the unoccupied property and informed us that a friend of his owned it. But since he had returned to Nigeria, the property was up for sale. I fell in love with it instantly, and with Chidi's backing and guidance, I was able to purchase it. I lived in the property whenever I was back from sea, from 1977 till I left England in 1983. When I returned to Nigeria, I kept the place by renting out the ground floor while keeping the upper floor for my visits to Liverpool. It turned out that most of my tenants were my seniors and professional colleagues who worked with the Nigerian National Shipping Line, who always traveled to Liverpool for their professional exams and other maritime engagements. At the time, the house became a center for partying and fun for Nigerians in Liverpool. Subsequently, Chidi returned to Nigeria, settled in Benin, and got involved in furniture business until he retired. He now lives in Unewi, his place of origin. We still talk regularly and are best of friends. I will never forget how his guardians opened my mind up to possibilities and helped me see what one could achieve with financial prudence. My experience with him and the purchasing of my house made me realize that if I had mismanaged my money, I would never have been able to buy that house. Financial prudence gave me a house in Liverpool, and that house brought me many advantages. Parting with shares. After Riverdale, I returned to sea as a junior marine engineer. By then, I needed 18 months sea time to be eligible for college, preparatory to the next professional qualification, the second-class certificate of competency. Since I was sailing on a steam turbine-propelled ship, 18 months of sea time will qualify me for second-class certificate of competence, STEAM. The goal of the Chair BP scholarship was for me to earn a first-class marine engineering certificate of competency, combined STEAM and motor. Even though I was well on my way, the journey was still far. It required more studies, classes, and sea time. After about 30 months, which included sea time and leave time, I obtained the required 18 months sea time, went to college, sat for the exam, passed, and obtained my second-class certificate of competency, STEAM. Share took us and put us on a motor ship for the required motor sea time towards the first class certificate steam and motor. I needed 9 months on motor ship and 9 months on steamships to be eligible for the first class college work and exam. Shortly after the motor sea time, things took a sudden twist. The maritime industry started to experience some lull, which meant that Share, like most other international shipping companies, began to review their fleet size and lay off excess seamen. The company asked us to return to Nigeria to work for some years before returning to the UK to complete the requirements for the first class certificate of competency, combined steam and motor, particularly the 9 months sea time. Instinctively, I had a very bad feeling about Share instruction to return to Nigeria, and I suspected a move like that would truncate many good opportunities for me. If I went home at that time, I knew it would be difficult for me to return to the UK because of the state the maritime industry was in at the time. I thought long and hard about the situation. I was desperate to stay the course and complete my program rather than waste time returning to Nigeria. I'm not exactly sure how I had learned the lesson, but I understood that one must look out for himself in life. If you do not, hardly will others do so for you. Eventually, Share brought us back to Nigeria and invited us for a discussion as regards the change of plans. By then, I had made up my mind to return to the UK to complete the program and achieve the first class certificate within 12 months, rather than wait another 5 years to do so. I had resolved to persuade them to consent to my request, so I politely requested that they allow me to return to Europe to get 9 months of STEM training and immediately do my first class combined motor and steam course. I needed in total about 12 extra months to be done. I can get my first class steam and motor certificate in 12 months if you allow me to go now. But if I follow the new plan, it will take me another 5 years, and I may never even get the opportunity to complete the training, I told them. Why the white man said, "Greg, that makes a lot of sense." There was a Nigerian woman, Mrs. Igboin, acting head of personal department, Share BP Nigeria at that time, who snarled at me and rhetorically asked, "Who is Greg Ogbefun to tell us how to run our system?" As far as she was concerned, my request was not worth considering. I became the subject of debate. The white man thought my plan made a lot of sense, but Mrs. Igboin disagreed. Eventually, she had her way, and Share BP ruled that I should stay back in Nigeria as proposed. But I was determined to stick to my plan, despite the official decision. The other 3 scholars were happy to align with Share directives, but I rebelled. I told them I was going to find a way to do my sea time and complete my program. It was a stalemate with Share, and we finally had to part ways. I thanked them for their support, but I needed to follow my dream, I told them. We shook hands at that junction, and I went back to England. That meant I no longer had a Share scholarship. All the perks, privileges, and support I got from Shares were withdrawn. All burdens were now mine, and I was on my own. Arab Maritime Petroleum Transport Company. It took a lot of guts to cut off from Share sponsorship, since it meant that all the support I had before were gone. First, I had to pay my way back to England and sorted out all traveling logistics myself. On my return to the UK, I applied and got a job with the Arab Maritime Petroleum Transport, AMPTC, headquartered in Kuwait. I negotiated with my new employers to do the 9-month sea time program at a stretch without taking any time off. Fortunately, they agreed, and I did 9 months at sea on a STEM ship. This was on the biggest ship that existed at that time, the MT Read-A-Thon, a 500,000 tons ultra-large crude oil tanker. The company AMPTC was a joint ownership of the 7 Emirates of the Arab world, having all partnered to form the business. From day one of establishing the company, they began to train their citizens towards eventual takeover, running and management of the company fleet of 7 ships. In some way, people like us were merely there as trainers for their citizens. The idea was to develop indigenous competencies and grow the maritime industry in their region. It was a smart move, one we have not learned to make in Nigeria. I did the first 4.5 months on Read-A-Thon before I moved on to another STEM ship, MT Chef. In those days, you had STEM turbine-driven ships, as well as diesel engine ships. A STEM ship had a boiler which generated superheated high-pressure steam that drove the ship's turbines, which rotated at a very high speed. The speed is regulated through a jar system to drive the propeller shaft with the propellers in the water. If, as a seafarer, you were doing motor sea time, you would be on a motor ship which is driven by a conventional diesel engine. The completion of the STEM sea time program was going to make me eligible to go to college and sit for my much desired first-class certificate of competencies, combined steam and motor. In the entire 9 months that I was at sea, I studied hard in preparation for the classes and examination. South Shared College of Technology. After obtaining the requisite sea time, I went to South Shared College of Technology, South Shared, England, for the last round of my program. South Shared is a coastal town in the northeast of England at the mouth of Riemen, some miles away from Newcastle. After the first 2 weeks in class at South Shared, I realized that what was being taught was very elementary for me, because I had almost covered the entire syllabus while at sea. That presented an opportunity for me to take things in my stride and have some fun. So every weekend, I went patrolling at Newcastle, leaving my flatmates wondering why I was so unserious. But I was also mindful of the fact that I was now solely responsible for my maintenance and upkeep. Among my flatmates in South Shared College were some Indians and in Nigeria, Ajagbe by name. Ajagbe was a bookworm who studied all day and some more hours at night. While I was on the combined motor and steam program, he was on the motor program. Ordinarily, every weekend, some of my Indian friends joined me to go patrolling in Newcastle. We would drive from South Shared to Newcastle and party through the night till about 3 a.m. and then drive back to South Shared. As soon as we returned to the hostel, I would have my bath, take my coffee, and start to study till 7 a.m. when I would go to sleep for a couple of hours before heading to school, mostly to study at my own pace. It happened that the hours I studied were the hours Ajagbe slept, and so, as far as he was concerned, Greg was not a serious student. After 2 months, I realized I was wasting my time at South Shared. I was way ahead of the class. On that account, I decided to put in for the first class certificate examination immediately, instead of waiting for 6 months. I headed to Liverpool Polytechnic for the exam. The system then was to do a written exam, and if you pass, you face a panel for an oral exam 2 days later. I passed the written exam and was invited to the panel session along 7 other students. One after the other, we went in, with each person spending 10 minutes before the panel. The result of the panel interview was immediate. The panel told you there and then if you passed or failed. When it was my turn, I went in and was kept by the panel much longer than 10 minutes. I thoroughly enjoyed the session and was very relaxed. It felt like I was giving them a lecture because the conversation were based on practical experiences at sea. I had more than enough to say, and the panelists were interested in listening as I spoke glowingly about the monster of a ship, Arab, that I had sailed on for months. The interviewers, who were all ex-seafarers that had left the sea 10 to 20 years previously, found my description extremely fascinating. After about an hour, the lead examiner suddenly came to himself and said, "Wait a minute, guys. We are supposed to be interviewing Greg, but here we are enjoying the conversation. By the way, Greg, you've passed." It was amazing. I had finally earned my first-class marine engineering certificate of competency, combined steam and motor. I was overjoyed. I recalled that it was a Thursday afternoon. From Liverpool Polytechnic, I drove back to South Sherd and packed my belongings. Ajagbe was flabbergasted when, as I packed my things, I told him I had passed my examinations and was on my way out. His response was classic, typical of your horoscope. You played all day and night, and then you passed your exam so easily in such record time. I'm happy for you anyways. Congratulations. The return of Share. After moving my things from South Sherd, I headed back to Liverpool to the company of my friends. All night on the following 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, my friends and I partied and painted Liverpool red. We had fun gallery. On Monday morning, at about 11 a.m., I was still battling the hangover in bed and prepared to sleep some more to recover from the weekend partying. When my died-up phone rang, I stretched my hand, picked it up, and said, "Hello." A voice at the other hand responded, "Hello? Is that Mr. Ogbefu on the line?" I recognized the voice instantly. It was the Share Tanker UK personal manager, John Spencer. I immediately jumped up and asked, "John, is everything okay?" He said, "Yes, Greg. We want to congratulate you on your success and on obtaining your first-class certificate of competency. It had been 12 months since I left Share, but unknown to me, they had been tracking my progress and knew when I passed my exam the previous week." John then informed me that Share BP wanted me back home immediately for a job opportunity. I was stunned. I had no idea they'd been tracking me. I had not spoken to them in over a year. I told John I already had a job, so no thanks. But he insisted and Share wanted me back. Then I said, "You know what? I'm sleepy at the moment. Can I call you back after I am well rested?" "No problem at all, Greg. I'll be waiting for your call. Get some rest." John responded and hung up. But sleep did not come back quickly. I could not believe what had just happened. Share calling me back for a job? I called John back at about 3 p.m. to ask for more details. He responded to all my inquiries. "Okay, here are my conditions. 1. I'd like to go back to Nigeria to get some more information on what Share is offering. Number, Share would have to give me a return ticket, London to Lagos to London, so that if I get to Lagos and things don't work out well, I'll be able to come without incurring any personal costs." John simply replied, "Done." I had already accumulated 4.5 months of leave from my employers, Arab Maritime Petroleum Transport Company, so I had time to fly to Nigeria. On Wednesday the following week, I went to London, collected my tickets, and flew to Lagos. Getting back to share in Lagos was interesting because a lot of the old faces were still there, including my fellow scholars. None of them ever went back to the UK to further their program like I did, because there were no opportunities for them to go again. But they seemed well and had moved on. Mrs. Igboyin again was part of the share officials designated to meet with me and discuss my possible recruitment. After all the congratulatory messages, I was informed that the job they had for me was at Boni, an island town in the Rivers State, southern Nigeria, that is a major export point for Nigerian crude oil. I was flown to Port Harcourt and lodged in the company Highbrow Guest House in Share residential area. The next day, I was taken to Boni by helicopter. The job Share was offering me was that of a marine maintenance superintendent offshore. Ideally, if you return to Nigeria, Share would start you on a job Group 6. But what they offered me was a Group 5 job, a level higher than Group 6. A British man, Captain Brian Smith, he was popularly called Offshore Monkey then, had been on that job for 8 years, and the company wanted me to take over from him so that he could return home. 3 of us, the terminal superintendent, an expatriate, Captain Brian Smith, whose job I was to take over, and myself, sat down to discuss to bring me up to speed. I instantly realized the job was limiting in terms of scope for growth and promotion. It was an isolated job. Captain Smith had been on that job for 8 years, going nowhere, even though he was well paid. Should I take the job? If I do, does it mean that in 8 years I will be in that same place, going nowhere? I asked myself. I wanted to grow and enjoy some mobility, vertically and horizontally, but the job seems too restricted for that. The starting remuneration was undoubtedly attractive, and taking the job would mean getting accommodation in Share ROA, Highbrow residential area. It was tempting, but not enough. I was 30 years old, and I wanted more. I was put in a chopper, flown back to Port Harcourt, and from there to Lagos. I believe young people should always be forward-thinking when it comes to career decisions. Short-term decisions should be dictated by the long-term vision, but it always starts with clarity. One must be clear about the kind of future one wants. Otherwise, decisions will be based on short-term gains only. Things would have been different for me if I had not turned down Share the first time and returned to the UK to complete my program. Here was another instance. I decided to adopt the same attitude of thinking about the future rather than the short term. When I returned to Lagos, set up, and present was Mrs. Igboyin, the woman who had opposed my wish to return to the UK over a year earlier, and other personnel. By the time the law in the oil industry worldwide had worsened, the oil price had crashed, people were cutting costs, and companies were laying off staff. At the meeting, I shared my thoughts about the job and said, the gentleman who has held this job for 8 years is a foreigner. He came to Nigeria to make money and return home. But for a Nigerian, a young man like me, the preference is career growth. The job, as currently structured, does not offer this. But then, they then asked for my recommendation to make the job attractive. I suggested they consider incorporating it in a bigger department, like the production department, whereby one could move horizontally and vertically to other sections of the department with time and grow, depending on performances. Mrs. Iboyi, who seemed determined to oppose my preferences, immediately said, "No, we can't do this, Greg. You are telling us to structure our operation. If you don't want to accept the job as it is, too bad. But we are not restructuring things." So there I was in another stalemate with Shell. The whites who were at the meeting that day simply folded their hands and washed. After a while, it was clear I was not going to have my way. They told me if I was not going to accept the job as it was then, they had no job for me. I thanked the Shell officials and informed them that in that case, the bond as enshrined in the scholarship had become null and void, and they accepted. We shook hands and I left. For the second time, I walked away from Shell, from an offer that seemed attractive in the first instance, but offered little for my future. I took my return ticket, which they had bought, returned to the UK, finished my leave, and went back to work in Kuwait. Chapter 9. Ocean Inch Cape and the Breadth of Stars. I was in Kuwait with the Arab Maritime Petroleum Transport Company, AMPTC, till 1983. I worked on ultra-large crude carriers, and when we were offshore loading crude, companies like Lamaco and Ocean Inch Cape, OIL, provided tugboats or tug services. Tug are vessels that maneuver other larger ships by pulling or pushing them through direct contact or a tow line. They usually move vessels that are restricted in maneuvering independently or those that cannot move by their own power due to certain prevailing circumstances. Tug are powerful for their size and they are strongly built. How many minutes of break do I have? At AMPTC, we use large tankers to load crude oil from most of the Gulf states when they got near loading platform offshore. These tankers turned off their power and had to be towed by tugs to where they were supposed to be positioned. The tug would connect their loading hoses from the platforms to the ships and dynamically hold the big vessels in position against wind and waves while loading operations took place. Today, my company, Stars, has tugs doing these very jobs for oil companies like Total, ExxonMobil, and Chevron in Nigeria. It is amazing how our life's path are subtly, delicately, and divinely chartered. The personnel of the tug companies, Lamaco, Ocean Inch Cape, etc., took quite some notice of me. I was aware that I stood out being the only black man among my white colleagues on the AMPTC ships. At that time, Ocean Inch Cape was looking to recruit a marine engineer superintendent for its operation in Bonny, Nigeria. The original intention had been to hire a non-Nigerian, but discovering a Nigerian with my skill set made them have a rethink. Ocean Inch Cape did not start as Ocean Inch Cape. In 1972, Ocean Fleet, commercially known as Blue Funnel, entered into partnership with the Inch Cape Group to operate a supply vessel company known as Ocean Inch Cape Limited, or OIL. While Ocean Fleet had no previous experience in the field, the Inch Cape Group had been the owners of a single supply ship, the San Pedro Gulf, out in Australia. It later allied with the Strait Steamship Company, which became the Bonnell Strait Offshore, BSO. This company had built 3 ships to support share activities of Bonnell. The Inchcape experience was used as a prototype to design the first 8 of the company vessel built at various yards in Holland. The company could not find any UK yard that could deliver this number of vessels on time over the following 4 years. With the rapid expansion of the oil industry in Nigeria and consequently share escalating its business concern in the country, Ocean Inchcape established businesses in Nigeria, ultimately creating a path I never knew I would be walking. The Ocean Inchcape personnel, unknown to me, had been paying particular attention to my work and conduct as a staff of AMPTC. I thought the attention of the personnel was due majorly to my skin color. But I would soon be proved wrong. I was on my leave in the UK when I got a phone call from a certain gentleman, Archie Smith, who introduced himself as the general manager of the Ocean Inchcape in Nigeria. He was on leave in their London office and would like to meet with me. He said, so we scheduled an appointment at their head office, number 33, the Minories in central London. After the first meeting and a few orders, Ocean Inchcape made me an offer and I agreed to work with them. On that note, I returned to Nigeria in February of 1983 as a staff of Ocean Inchcape. It was agreed that I be put on expatriate terms and conditions of services, including salaries and tour of duties, which was 50 days on and 50 days off. The company also was to ship my belongings from England to Nigeria. My properties included a brand new custom-made Mercedes 200, which I had acquired in 1982 as a sort of self-reward after working so hard and spending little or nothing on myself whilst at sea. I had gone to Mercedes-Benz Park Lane, London, and requested a left-steering car capable of enduring the sub-Saharan climate if need be. Mercedes had taken my specification, built the car in Stuttgart, Germany, and shipped it to Liverpool for me. 3 months after my arrival in Nigeria, I got married to my first wife, Dr. Cecilia Ne Ojezua. She was a medical doctor with the Nigerian Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. At that time, I would live in an NNPC housing estate at Ejegba, Warri. I will share more details on my marital experiences in a different chapter. I just need like 2 minutes to be. Going to work, I drove from Warri to Port Harcourt and would then take a boat to Bonny from Port Harcourt. The Bonny trips were always enjoyable. In 1984, Ocean Inchcape promoted and transferred me to its operational base in Port Harcourt. Oh, give me 1 hour. Because the company had been highly impressed at my performance, I got into the company as a base superintendent and was now being promoted to assistant technical manager. Ocean Inchcape made me realize my worth and importance as a professional. There is one of the reasons I do not undermine my Nigerian staff today. I do everything possible to treat them with respect and pay them what I would pay a white expatriate. My Nigerian captain earned well and work for 6 months a year. The chief engineers earn well too, because I know what it takes to do what they do. Unfortunately, many companies do not treat their Nigerian workers right. Some employers rip their employees off and show them little or no regard, even when they have the necessary qualifications, experience, and skills as their white counterparts, who are treated like gods. Interestingly, Ocean Inchcape was working for shares, and we were actually housed in share camp, Boni. So indirectly, I was back in shares. When members of their management held about my Ocean Inchcape job, they thought I was the smart ass who had made the right decision, turning them down. Well, they were right. What they had wanted to pay me in 5 years, Ocean Inchcape paid me in a year. It was just unfortunate, or better still, fortunate that a fellow Nigerian was the one who made it difficult for Chair to retain me. Good enough, I still remain friends with most of the Chair folks from way back. One of them, who retired as a deputy managing director, is now a board member of one of my companies. Besides, my company, Stars, became a major indigenous service provider for Share. So consequently, they benefited a lot from their earlier investments in me. Entering the classification feed. Before buying or building a ship, the issue of classification is paramount and needs to be put into consideration. The duty of classification of ship rests in the ambit of international classification organizations. These organizations belong to the International Association of Classification Society, IACS, which consists of member marine classification societies or different nations. The idea of marine classification is to guarantee the safety of life, property, and the environment through the enforcement of compliance with technical and engineering standards in the design, construction, and life cycle maintenance of ships and other marine-related facilities. The British Classification Society is called the Lloyd Register Group Limited, LR. It is the oldest classification society, founded in 1760 and owned by Lloyd Register Foundation, a UK charity dedicated to education and research and in science and engineering. The French Classification Society is called Bureau Veritas, BV, while the American Society is the American Bureau of Shipping, ABS. Until recently, ABS was the second largest classification society with a class fleet of over 12,000 commercial vessels and offshore facilities. The society's primary responsibility is to ensure that ships are built to specification and standard that make them seaworthy. After a ship is checked and tested, classification body will issue a classification certificate which shows that a ship has been built to standard. This classification certificate is required for a ship owner to register the ship and obtain marine insurance. At times, it may be necessary to produce it before a ship is allowed into some port or waterway. It might not be out of place to say that a ship without classification certificate is a dead ship. Without a valid certificate, it is impossible to sail a ship on the high sea. The classification certificate is usually valid for 5 years. It is renewable by subjecting the ship to a special survey that involves taking the ship out of the water to a shipyard for inspection, and there necessary repairs are effected to ensure it still meets the minimum requirement for the classification certificate to be renewed. In between the special survey, there are annual inspections of the ships on the anniversary date of the certificate insurance to ensure the ship's continuing integrity and seaworthiness. Suppose a ship is far away and is not due back at the home port in time for inspection on the due date. The classification society could send a survey from the organization to where the ship is for assessment and certificate endorsement. But what if a classification society has to inspect multiple ships at different locations worldwide? It could get cumbersome for the classification society. Hence, classification society make processes and logistics easier by partnering companies or individuals with the right competencies to conduct inspection on their behalf in different parts of the world. In 1984, Ocean Inchcape got a contract to represent the German Classification Society called Germanischer Lord, GL, in Nigeria. That was the beginning of a serious foray into the business of assessment and classification of vessels, a field that would later fascinate and capture my interest. On a personal level, an event occurred that changed the course of my professional life. One of our tugboats was in dry dock for repairs under the supervision of Lloyd Register Surveyor from London. All the engineers in the company and the superintendent from our company head office in London tried for days to resolve the problem without success. Though a part of the team, I was not given any opportunity to suggest a remedy, and the share contracts the boat was servicing was being threatened. The problem had to do with the rudder system, and it proved to be very complicated. Everyone was confused and worried. Somehow, an idea dropped in my mind on how the problem could be fixed, but I lacked the courage to suggest the idea. When all others had failed, I finally summoned courage and explained my idea to Lord Supervisor, drawing it on a piece of paper. The surveyor considered my suggestion and gave it a trial. Well, my idea worked, and everyone was delighted. Extremely elated, the surveyor immediately wrote their London office, requesting that I be appointed as an acting surveyor for Lloyd Register, and that was exactly what happened. Seeing that I had gotten accreditation from Lloyd Register, Ocean Inchcape decided that amongst my other official duties for the company, I should be made the arrowhead for its new survey contract. I was glad and believed that God had ordered my step. The watershed was a unique and awe-inspiring experience for me, and I relished it. I also traveled to France and Germany for induction courses. And with time, I started working on behalf of Bureau Veritas, Germanischer Lloyd, and Lloyd Register. Surveying then became part of my job description as a technical superintendent. Later that year, 1984, the expatriate technical manager, Mr. George Garrosh, died of a heart attack. The company, as a result, requested me to act as the technical manager, the first Nigerian to occupy that position. Ocean Inchcape was symbolic of how opportunities came in our time. As long as we work hard and specialize in a profession Jobs were available to be taken, and good ones too, even in the public service. It does not matter whether you had contracts in government or not. Nigeria allowed young people to fulfill their dreams back then. Both foreign and local companies operated with freedom and fairness. The federal government advertised scholarship and adopted shortlisting process that did not discriminate against anyone, regardless of social status. You would see the adverts in newspaper, apply, and if you pass, you got called and awarded the scholarship. It did not matter who you were, rich or poor. If you earned it, you won it. The playing field was level for everyone. Chapter 9. The Inchcape and the Birth of Stars. The Birth of Stars. In 1986, Ocean Inchcape informed me about the company decision to appoint me as the first Nigerian general manager. It was decided that the best way to do that was to transfer me to the UK office, promote me to the new role in London, and then transfer me back to Nigeria. The transition period in the UK was supposed to be for 2 years. Consequently, Kelvin, a white man, came to take over the job as technical manager, while I went to the UK to take over the role in the London office. By then, my marriage had already failed. I was in the middle of a difficult divorce process. Since I was to travel out of the country for 2 years, I sold every property I had to my name, including my Mercedes Benz. My parents were struggling to build their house then, so I thought I could help. I took all the proceeds of what I sold and dedicated almost everything towards the completing of their building project. I was left with just about 100 naira by the time I was ready to leave Nigeria for UK. Just as my parents were putting the finishing touches to their house, I got a message from Port Harcourt that I was wanted at the Ocean Inchcape office urgently. I had a gut feeling something was wrong. I still had my official call with me. So, I called one of my friends, Henry Omu, and asked if he could travel to Port Harcourt with me. Henry obliged, and we drove from Benin to the office in Port Harcourt, with my mind trying to figure out what could have possibly gone wrong. When I got to the office, I was asked to face a panel that had been set up. The general manager of Ocean Inchcape Nigeria at that time, Mr. Roy Croft, and 2 Nigerian managers. The finance and personnel constituted the panel. What happened next was going to set me on an entirely different path in life. It is amazing how events change the trajectory of our lives. The panel alleged that the report I issued after an independent condition survey of a vessel owned by our competitor placed our assets at a disadvantage in a subsequent call for tender, and that I should therefore resign my position. I was dumbfounded. Ocean Inchcape had come to mean everything to me. I had the OIL logo everywhere, my car, shirts, jeans, and even bed cover. I was to the company's spirit, body, soul. I had committed everything to the company and believed that only retirement could separate us. I asked the panel for clarity because I did not understand the accusation. They only said that my report as a surveyor had not been favorable to the company. Then it occurred to me that they had expected me to write a favorable assessment report for the company vessel, regardless of professional realities. That did not go down well with me. It contradicted everything I had learned about values, integrity, and professionalism. After going back and forth with the committee members on the issues, I went back to my office and wrote a resignation letter. My secretary, Celestine Nwankpa, refused to type the letter because he could not imagine me leaving the company. He was too distraught about my decision to resign. I had to ask the general manager, secretary, Mrs. Davis, to type it for me. In the resignation letter, I stated verbatim the reason for which I was asked to resign and that I had no intention to contest it. The general manager, who unfortunately died about 3 years ago, said to me after receiving the letter, "Greg, in view of all you've done for the company and your excellent record, let's keep this civil and not give details on your resignation. Let's say that you are leaving the company in search of greener pastures." I said to him, "Why don't you write it the way you want it and I will sign it?" He agreed, wrote the letter with his pen and showed it to me. I said it was fine and got it typed and signed. I kept the handwritten letter to date. After I submitted the resignation letter, I went to my office, packed my things, and walked out of Ocean Inchcape with Henry and 100 naira to my name. I went to my near empty house, as I had sold and given away all my property, believing that after my 2 years sojourn in the UK, I would return home with new stocks. Distraught as to what to do next, I was still the breadwinner in my family and had been sure things would get better as soon as I got to the UK to prepare for the general manager position at Ocean Inchcape. But I was wrong. I never saw what happened coming. My youngest sister, Bosede, was staying with me in Port Harcourt at the time. And after a couple of days, I decided to travel to Benin to break the news to my family, and then to proceed to Lagos to put my thoughts together. I desperately wanted to get away from the Port Harcourt environment with all the ome. By the time Bosse and I were leaving Port Harcourt, things had changed drastically. I no longer had a job, I was broke, and had no car. We transported our suitcase by taxi to the motor park and then took public transport to Benin. All these with 100 naira. At that time, East-West Road was terribly in disrepair. It was so bad that at a point, between Kaima and Patini, a gulf completely split the road into two. The consequences was that vehicle coming from Port Harcourt would, on getting to the bad section of the road, stop, and passengers would alight, cross the gully to the other side with their luggage, board another vehicle, and continue their journey. We got to that point and alighted. As we were crossing the gully, I lifted my suitcase on my shoulder. As I did that, Bosede looked at me for a few seconds and began to cry. When I asked why she was crying, she said, "Brother, look at you. You were up there and you had everything going well for you. You used to travel to this route with your car and driver, and now this." That jolted me to the reality of my new status. I patted her on the back and said, "It is okay. That is life. Things will work out." When we got home, I heard nothing back when I gave the bad news to my family. Of course, the reaction are better imagined. And truthfully, I could feel and understand their sadness, fear, and concern. This was in 1986. I was 35 years old, jobless, broke, and had lost my marriage the year before. There was no doubt I had to chart a new direction. So I began to ponder on what to do next. The Ocean Inchcape experience had scared me dreadfully. I needed a break and time to think. So I headed to Lagos, where I stayed with my younger brother, Tai, where he and his young family lived in a small apartment at Ilasamaja. It was a difficult time in my life, but things were about to take a turn. One morning, after about a week, while still in a state of partial depression, I called one of my contacts at Moby Producing Nigeria and narrated my OD at Ocean Inchcape. He listened with rapt attention and then invited me to the Moby office to discuss my situation with them. I thanked him, got prepped, and headed out to Moby. I had no expectation whatsoever. I just wanted to share my predicament with people I had developed good relationship with while working for Ocean Inchcape. When I got to the Moby office, the reception was warm, and those I met with were keen on hearing my story. I went on to tell them everything that happened at Ocean Inchcape and how I had ended up financially and professionally stranded. They felt really sorry for me and resolved to provide me with leverage by offering me inspection job I could execute as an independent surveyor on their marine fleet in their Kwa Ibor terminal. I could not believe it. It was like a miracle. Manna falling from heaven. Or the Red Sea parting kind of stuff. The Ocean Inchcape experience was about to pay off in spades. If I had not worked for them, I would not have become an expert in ship inspection, surveying, and classification. The guys at Moby knew about my skills, and it provided them with a basis to help me. Their offer was for me to go to their regional office at Eket and onward to Kwa Ibor to conduct an independent inspection on 4 of their vessels and present a report. They asked, "Do you have a letterhead to your name?" I responded that I did not have one. It was at that point that I began to seriously consider starting and running a business as a long-term option. Call it accidental or desperation, but that was the genesis of my life as an entrepreneur. I moved fast. I got someone to help me do a name search at the Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC. He was Mr. Aku, an accountant. I gave him a number of options to search for, but my main interest was the name Stars. I wanted Stars Company Limited. Mr. Aku searched for it and found too many names with stars. I was disappointed, but determined not to lose the name. I had to think of something, and I did. "Why don't you try Stars instead?" I asked him. "Do you mean star with a Z?" He said, "Yes, Stars." I responded, I don't know what inspired the Z idea, but that was how it came about. Mr. Haku checked for the name, and it was free. He registered it and triggered the start of an exciting journey in my life. But at that point, I did not have a big vision for stars. I just needed a platform for transacting business, and stars was bettered for that purpose, or so I thought. I went back to Mobi and was asked to write the company officially. I did so using stars as my company name. I was put in their King Learjet and flown to Eket. Confirm if it's time for my break. My life was about to change, and I sensed it. I spent 5 days at Eket, inspecting their vessels and writing the reports. The Lagos office of Mobi entrusted the Eket office to pay me immediately, and I completed the inspection and developed the report. My fee came to 5,400 naira, and I was given a check of that value. The feeling I had when I was paid is indescribable. I was over the moon. My last salary at Ocean Landscape was 1,800 per month before I was fired. I'll be taking a 5 minutes break to use the restroom. For everyone who is seated here, thank you for coming. The book I am currently reading is Not Always Easy, My Voyage from Obscurity by Engineer Greg Ogbefun. Is a typical grass to grace story, and it is very inspiring for the youth. It will be nice if you can get it and also follow along. The book is also available on Amazon. You can get it. It's very inspiring. It's of a great man who we all know, our very own in Benin here, who moved from poverty down to the billionaire he is today. Thank you very much, everyone. Do what you want to do.
Okay. Hi. Okay. Hello, Ambassador Dr. Lancelot Imaswe, Nollywood filmmaker and cultural activist. I'm here supporting Aaron Sarime Angel. I want her to break the record. Do you want her to break the record? Yes, thank you, thank you. So let's keep supporting schools, students, celebrities from here. Guys, go on your social media. Let's keep pushing her until she's there. 9 more days to go. Are you ready, please? Yeah, chop, 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 chop. Yeah, she can do it. 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 Yeah, she can do it. Let's keep supporting her. Let's keep supporting her. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you all. A door to the wall is for real. Thank you. Yeah.
Mobi officials took me to their bank in Eket, and I opened an account there the same day. There was no doubt in my mind that God had favored me. I felt truly blessed. I left Eket and went to Port Harcourt, where I decided to check my market value by applying for another job. At that time, there was a marine transportation department in NHPC, Apapa. I wrote to them asking for a job. They responded and asked me to attend an interview in 2 weeks, but I never went for it. After all, I was only testing the waters. But when I wrote the classification societies, I meant business. They met me back and wrote, asking if I would like to represent them as a non-exclusive surveyor in Nigeria. My answer was yes. Bureau Veritas, Lord Register of London, and Germanischer Lord of Germany all appointed me as their representative and terminated their contract with Ocean East Cape. Now, I was back in this game as the expense of my former employer and a small-time businessman. Section 4, Marriage and Children. Chapter 10, Marriages. This has perhaps been the most challenging chapter for me to write, mostly because I prefer to keep family issues private, and certain aspects of my family life bear painful memories. Like most people can bear witness, family is often a mixed bag. When you open that bag, the contents are heterogeneous, a coalescing of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Indeed, to the best of my ability, I have tried to be a good person my entire life. A good son, a studious student, loyal friend, astute professional, loving husband, and caring father. But as you would have seen in this book, and especially in this chapter, I have not always been successful at being the best at all these roles. I've had my shares of failures in every area, especially in marriage. I've chosen to be open in this chapter to further illustrate that success stories are also stories of weaknesses, failings, and mistakes. You will see a lot of those in here. You will also see the joy and pride of a father and a husband in the good time. Family means a lot to me, and as one gets older, it becomes more and more apparent that at the end of it all, nothing is more important than family, and the people God brings along are parts in life. Rain. It was during my stay in Liverpool that I met raining. Liverpool, with all of its vibrant nightlife and wide fun, lured me into clubbing most weekends. Perhaps because of my conservative, moralistic, and underprivileged childhood. When I got to England, it was as if I had to make up for lost fun. One evening, a friend of mine, Nnamdi Emodi, was at the University of Liverpool doing his master's at that time, invited me to a club. We had planned to have a nice boys' time out, but unexpectedly, his girlfriend, Laura, a nurse trainee at Houston Hospital near Liverpool, signified interest and insisted on coming along with her girlfriend. Open it outside. That meant our plan was scuttled. Nnamdi called to break the news to me and asked if I could still tag along, nevertheless. He did not want to be left alone with the two ladies. I obliged, and off I went with the trio to the club. Nnamdi's girlfriend, Laura, was Jamaican, and her friend, whom I was supposed to pair up with, was from the St. Kitts Island in the West Indies. To say I was love-struck when I first saw Riemen was not to be an exaggeration. It was love at first sight for me. She was a beautiful, sightly, chubby lady with a unique gait that gave her an attractive carriage and a West Indian accent that sounded sweet. That evening, while Nnamdi and Laura were dancing, Renee sat in a corner, reluctant to go to the dance floor because she was shy. Yet, I was determined to dance with the beautiful Renee at all costs. On that account, getting her to the dance floor became my primary mission that evening. So I started a conversation with her, particularly about how we possibly shared a history due to our African heritage. I cracked some friendly joke to get her laughing and shared vulgar glasses with Coke, which I found out she loved. Engrossed in our conversation, before long, we lost track of time. We had a connection. A little while afterwards, we were on the dance floor, digging it. Renee had loosened up, and we danced away. I happen to love music, and I am also quite a good dancer. Music and dancing have been important hobbies of mine for many years. And even today, I still give much younger people a run for their money when it comes to executing the latest dancing step. The famous Gbese dance in Nigeria is one I enjoy these days, and Generation Z lads around me are often amazed at how conversant I am with the steps. Back then, if you were a good dancer in England, every girl loved to dance with you. My dancing skill thrilled Renee, and she could not have enough of it. Our West Indian background make it a lot easier for us to complement each other perfectly. As we danced to a lot of reggae and soul, that was 1975. Shalimar, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, and of course, Bob Marley reigned supreme. The fun we had was electric and non-stop. Due to the connection we had that evening, Riemen would afterwards always call me over the phone. "Hey Greg, are you coming out this evening or not?" Often eager not to miss out on the phone, and because I had fallen in love with her, I would quickly jump into my car, ready to take her out. Before long, a relationship blossomed between us. At that time, our father Eugene, now late, was the Attorney General of St. Kitts and Nevis, who also owned a private jet leasing company. Our mother, Lucy, who is still alive, was then Director of Nursing in the West Indies in the island. Conceivably, she is from aristocratic family that was relatively high the political and social ladder in their company. When my one-year program at Riverdale College ended, and when I had to go back to sea as part of my time towards my professional qualification in 1976, I traveled with no means of communicating with Riemen. Yet, when I came back, we both carried on from where we left off without any hassles. Doubtfully, Riemen's parents visit her at least twice a year. I recall that the first time they came to Liverpool to visit, she told them she was in a relationship with a Nigerian guy, and they insisted on meeting me. I tried to dodge that meeting, but I could not. In the end, I had to host a small party for our parents in my newly purchased apartment. Riemen's parents were quite interested in my background, and I was equally delighted to share my story with them. They listened with rapt attention and found out I came from a humble Nigerian background to being in England, training as a marine engineer, rather fascinating. I believe they liked me almost immediately, or so it seemed. They had only 2 children, Riemen and a younger brother, Roger, who later joined us at Liverpool for his education. Over time, Riemen's parents more or less embraced me as one of their children. As the year wore on, Riemen and I grew more intimately. In 1979, after I got my first professional qualification and had a 6-month-long vacation, she decided to take time off work and come with me to work and know Nigeria, as we are beginning to talk seriously about our future. By some interesting coincidence, at that time, Riemen's relative was the Chief Justice of Nigeria. That alone made it easy for her to get her parents' consent for the trip. Our subsequent visit to Sir Alexandra and the family made Riemen's trip even more memorable. We spent 4 months in Nigeria, during which she met all my family members. Everybody loved Riemen, and she also loved Nigeria. We both thought we could settle in Nigeria. After the vacation, when we returned to the UK, Riemen said to me, "Greg, I've met all your friends in Nigeria, and they are all graduates. It looks like formal education is important to your people. I would like to attend university as well." It obviously meant a lot to her, so I decided to help her get admission into Boston College for a nursing degree. Subsequently, in 1980, she moved to Boston, Massachusetts for the degree program. I accompanied her there and saw her settled into school and her apartment. Her parents were responsible for funding of her tuition, but they were forever grateful to me for being a catalyst that made her take that leap. Rain retired as a professor of nursing, a heartbreak. Sometimes in early 1982, Rain father invited us to St. Kitts for a visit. I joined Rain in Boston, and from there, we went by plane to San Juan, Puerto Rico. At Puerto Rico, a propeller 5-seater aircraft sent by our father was already waiting to fly us to St. Kitts, where they lived. The family had expansive estates, and our father took me around, doing a lot of introductions. There, I met Rain family and a lot of movie stars like Isaac Hayes, Richard Roundtree, and others. Famous black actors often travel to the island on vacation for relaxation and fun, so there were common faces around there. Considering where I was coming from, meeting so many international stars was an incredible experience for me. Rain's father was from Nevis, so from St. Kitts, we left for Nevis, which is about 20 minutes by flight. Lucille was from St. Lucia, a French-speaking island. I got to know all those areas during that visit. Days after our arrival, Rain's parents requested to have words with me. In the course of our discussion, they confessed to liking me and being excited at the prospect of their daughter and I getting married. Having embraced me as a son and not merely a son-in-law to be, their desire, they stated, was for both Rain and I to settle in America, and that they were poised to get my American passport and citizenship sorted out. The only condition to make it a reality was for us to relocate to America. Settle in America, I did not see it coming at all. I immediately became worried because settling in America was never part of my plans. Besides, my parents' position swiftly weighed in, and heavily too. In the days running up to my leaving Nigeria, night after night, my parents sat me down and pleaded, when you get there, don't do anything bad. Don't fight anyone. Don't steal. Don't keep bad company. And the crowning one, don't marry an Oyinbo woman, a white woman. Dear, because if you do, you won't come back home. You know we are poor, and we are looking up to you now. Please, don't go there and forget your family. That last warning was etched deep in my spirit. Suddenly, when Rain's parents finished talking, I expressed my gratitude at the offer and told them I would like to go think about it. I left their presence with a heavy heart as I sensed gloom on the horizon. Suddenly, the future I had hoped for with Rain was under threat. When our visit ended at St. Kitts, Rain and I flew back to Boston, where we had a serious heart-to-heart. I reminded her of how she had been to Nigeria, seen my parents and other family members, observed my position in the family, and understood the role I was obliged to play to help them. As gently as I could, I told her that the idea of settling in America was a tough one for me to contemplate. Now, talk less of mentioning to my parents and that I would like to go back home after all my training to settle in Nigeria. From there, I could travel to any country in the world whenever I wanted. This became a point of disagreement. However, she said she would communicate my position to her parents. Unfortunately, when she did, they insisted that if I was not going to settle in America, we both had to part ways. It was a deadlock. At that point, I knew our relationship was over. I had never been more devastated. But what exactly had I expected? For Rain to uproot her life and follow me to Nigeria, and for her parents to support her? Perhaps I had not been very realistic. I packed my bag and left. It hurt to my bone marrow. I had had 7 wonderful years with Rain, from 1975 to 1982. But that evening, it was all over. Under a different set of circumstances, I might have consented to stay in America as Rain's parents wished. But obeying my parents' instruction was indispensable to me. As much as our parents were to Rain, we were both young, and our parents meant everything to us. Going with Rain meant many benefits, including obvious economic ones. But what enticed the average young person, like the inheriting of heaven and earth in St. Kitts and Nevis, meant little to me. If I had married Rain, by now, we would have retired to St. Kitts, sipping coconut juice on the beach, with sunshades and growing on cruises. But that was not to be. In any case, I flew back to the UK from Boston after that problematic resolution. At that time, I was working in Kuwait, but living in England. 3 months after our breakup, Rain phoned to inform me that she was pregnant. I was stunned and baffled and did not quite know how to handle the unexpected news. 1,001 things played on my mind at that moment. A child always complicates things in such scenarios, and ours was no different. But painfully, I had moved on, and starting talks on something as serious as pregnancy was sure to draw me back into the relationship. I thought, and I was not ready for that. A combination of uncertainty, pain, anxiety, and some measure of guilt made me decide to walk away from Rain after the news of her pregnancy. She contacted me twice afterward, but obviously emotionally unprepared, I played the coward, blank off, and remained mute. To further complicate matters, at the time Rain broke the news to me, I had reconnected with an old secondary school mate, and I was already envisaging the possibility of a long-term relationship. I suppose I needed to quickly fill the vacuum Rain left and reinforce the fact that my long-standing relationship with her had ended, or more appropriately put, had to end. So desperate was I to move on from the pain. Neither of us wanted the relationship to end. But because the two family desires was at variance, the wise thing was to go our separate ways. My threshold to bear the pain of separation was extremely low. Thus, I focused on the budding relationship with all seriousness. In September of 1982, I got a letter by post from the City Council of Cambridge in Massachusetts, informing me that a daughter of mine had been delivered. The City Council stated her name as Natasha and requested for me to confirm that I was the father. When I did not respond to the letter, Rain realized I did not want to get involved, and it must have further crushed her. But I did not mean to hurt her. All I was looking for at the time was an escape from the pain of ending my relationship with her. Meeting Cecilia. Sometimes in late 1982, shortly after my relationship with Rain ended, I visited Nigeria. There was a big vacuum in my heart. I was feeling depressed and desperately needed distraction and to move on with my life. So while in Nigeria, I reconnected with some of my old Edo College schoolmates. They provided a perfect distraction. They made me remember the good old days and brought much laughter. One evening, as we were socializing and talking, the conversation moved to our old classmates. We were mentioning names and wondering where each person was. Then, someone mentioned Cecilia Ojezua. Cecilia had been a good friend of mine during my Edo College days. She was not a classmate, but a student at a sister Catholic girls' school called St. Maria Goroti College in Benin. Her father was my father's boss at work, while her younger brother, Alex, was my college son at Edo College. I used to visit their home from school during the holiday and spend considerable time helping Cecilia with her mathematics. I was inquisitive to know how Cecilia was doing, and when I was told she was based in Warri, working as a medical doctor for NMPC, I made a mental note to check on her anytime I was in Warri. That did not take too long. A few days later, I was in Warri, and naturally, I visited Cecilia at her workplace. It was an exciting reunion, and she took me out for lunch, which she updated me on the happening in her life. The difficult part was how she had gotten involved with a colleague who had impregnated her while hiding the fact that he had a wife in Lagos. He also rejected the pregnancy and claimed he was not responsible for it. Cecilia was shattered. The situation was a difficult one. She was seriously contemplating an abortion. I counseled her not to do it and genuinely felt compassion for the burden she carried. The next day, she picked me up from my hotel to take me to the park to get a vehicle to Benin. After she dropped me, as she was walking away, she turned round to wave goodbye to me, and I noticed the tears in her eyes. I called her, and she walked back to me. I walked a few steps to meet her, held her, and said something I did not plan, not envisage I would ever say. Don't worry, Cecilia. I will be back in Nigeria in about a year, and I will marry you when I come. She stood there, transfixed. She could not believe what she has just heard. Not wanting to have a rethink, I turned away, entered the vehicle, and headed to Benin. When I got home, I told my father what had happened, and he asked me, "What will you do with the child if you marry Cecilia?" I answered my father that I'll take care of the baby, and when she grows of age of understanding, we will tell her the truth about her father. If she desires, she can go meet him if he is willing to accept her. But until then, I will remain a foster father to her. My father paused for a while, looked at me with pride, and said, "Son, if you look after somebody else's child, God will look after your children." Then he gave me his blessings to go ahead. Once I returned to the UK after my vacation, I began to communicate regularly with Cecilia. When she was due to deliver in June 1982, I went to Mother Care in London, bought 2 suitcases of baby and nursing mother materials, and headed to Nigeria. She delivered safely, and we rejoiced. During that visit, we fixed our marriage for March 1983, and I returned to the UK. My first marriage. In February 1983, I returned to Nigeria and got married to Cecilia by March as we planned. We began our family life in Warri, and it was amazing at the start. From Warri, I would travel to Port Harcourt, and from there, I went to Bonny to do my time on onshore and return to Port Harcourt whenever I was off duty and back to Warri. Eventually, my office transferred me to Port Harcourt as a technical superintendent, and Cecilia was also able to arrange with NNPC to transfer her to Port Harcourt. We lived as one happy family until the early part of 1985, when our relationship started to break down. My first son, Christopher, was born in 1983, and my daughter, Iro, in 1985. Sometimes in 1985, I traveled to the UK for a short official training program. When I returned from my trip that fateful day, I went to Christopher's school to pick him up and took him home. While undressing him, I noticed fresh fetish mark on his back. I was shocked. I should mention that such marks on children are not uncommon in many parts of Nigeria. They are accepted in societies for different reasons, mostly based on traditional, superstitious belief about protection, blessings, identification, or at times, occultism, which was shocking. What was shocking was that I thought Cecilia and I were on the same page regarding not dabbling into such things. I did not believe in them and completely rejected them for our children. The brand of spiritualism practiced by our people, particularly regarding accommodating juju, was distasteful. I had always believed Cecilia understood and shared that position with me. A mirage of thoughts crossed my mind as I examined Christopher's body that afternoon. How could this be? What was Cecilia thinking? Has she been into this for long? Have I been a fool? Many questions flashed across my mind. My mind could not bear the suspense, so straight away I called Cecilia. Even though she was at work, I told her my observations, but she waved it off, saying it was nothing to worry about and that it was for our son's good. She said that while I was away, Christopher had been healed, and that when she visited our hometown, her mother took the child to where they put those marks on him to cure his sickness. I was stunned and speechless, so I ended the call. When she returned home, we got talking. As I ended the call, as clearly as I could, I expressed my confusion and disappointment to her. How could she, a medical doctor, take that option for a sick child? Why go the fetish way? Why did she do it, disregarding my position on such matters? That day, the conversation turned into a serious heated argument that sowed the seed for a complete breakdown of our relationship. It is a common tradition of the Benin people that when a man gets married, the family would require that she takes a family oath. The oath is meant to make the woman pledge allegiance and swear never to harm the man or his children, whether they are biological offspring or not. In that light, when I married Cecilia, my parents asked me to bring her to take the family oath, but I refused and told them I did not believe in such fetish tradition and would not want to subject my wife to it. My wife would never do anything harmful, so they need not worry, I assure them. When the incident with Christopher happened, I was completely devastated, and because I was not sure how far she had gone, I felt obliged to let my father know about the situation. He did not miss the chance to remind me of how I declined to get Cecilia to take the family oath, despite my skepticism about the practice. I began to wonder if my family had not been right. Often, due to the troubling incidents, and for the second time, my parents requested that Cecilia took the oath. I thought she would consent to it, but she bluntly refused. Once again, I was faced with a relationship-related deadlock. Sadly, from then on, things only got worse between us. Barely 2 years into our marriage, everything fell apart, and we separated and finally divorced. It was a painful experience, but that union gave us 2 beautiful children, Christopher and Nero. Fast forward decades later, a few years before Cecilia died, in 2018, we had become best of friends. We used to say to each other, if we had known better, we would have held on to what we heard. We were led. I had difficulties with subsequent marriages, and so did she. Nevertheless, I am glad that she had joy in knowing that her first true love was still dear to her at her passing on. A second shot at marriage. The Americans often say, when it rains, it pours. So it was the case with me, that as my marriage to Cecilia ended in 1985, I lost my job early part in 1986. However, God being gracious, I started my business on the 1st of July, 1986. With all the strength I could summon, I began to live my life as best as I could and get my heart together. Circumstances of life would always test us, and when they do, we will react in different ways. I do not know exactly why, but I have always been someone who moves on like others. I feel the pain, pressures, regrets, and losses. but I tend to move on despite them. Whenever I get the opportunity to speak to younger, less experienced people about life, I often ask them to develop perseverance as a trait, indeed as a virtue. After Cecilia and I separated, I was not ready to go into a new relationship, as I was at the same time struggling to get my new business venture firmly grounded. Cecilia filed for divorce right after I lost my job, so I had emotional issues to cope with simultaneously. The divorce process lasted for almost 3 years. The court gave me custody of the children and granted her access. In 1988, Christopher, 5, and Hero, 3 years old, were brought home. The three of us bonded well, living as a happy family. Her mother had access to them and saw them anytime she wanted. In 1989, I met Phoebe Beraher. A relationship developed between us, and I felt it was worth giving a long-term shot. Moreover, I thought it would be nice for the children to have a mother figure in the home. But I guess my experience with marriage had made me more cautious, so I was careful not to go beyond traditional marriage. In contrast, I had gone all the way for my first marriage, the traditional, court, and church weddings. Within a year into this new marriage, which took place in 1989, we had our first child, a boy, Efosa. He brought so much joy to me, just like Christopher and Hero did. I am convinced that there is nothing in this world like having a child. The mixture of excitement, joy, and pride a parents feel when a new child arrives is almost impossible to describe. To experience such a feeling more than once is a great blessing. The joy that my 3 children feed me with was enough to help me through difficult circumstances. And of course, at the back of my mind was always Natasha, the one I had run away from. I always wondered how she was and how Rainy was doing. I constantly wondered how things turned out in the future. Nevertheless, a strange thing began to happen. Soon after we had Efosa, Christopher and Hero started to have health challenges. The worrying thing was that no one could diagnose what was wrong with them. At that point, I called my parents because I was beginning to come to a challenging period for me, in the sense that the moment it looked like I had no spouse in my life, the women would come in their droves. With the passage of time, I did date a few, but I was careful not to open my heart to anybody. Mine was a case of twice beaten, 10 times shy. Understandably, I began to be suspicious of marriage. My first marriage had failed, and so had the second. However, my career was growing, and I was increasing vulnerable to women. To surmount this mountain, I chose to spend a lot of time at the office, seeing the light. Admittedly, I shied away from any serious romantic relationship, but with time, it became obvious to me that I could not run away forever. With this in mind, when I felt steadier and stronger emotionally, I began considering a young Benin lady, Evelyn Idemudia, for marriage. All my years, I have been skeptical about Benin ladies because of the unpopular claim that they are diabolical. But since my first two spouses were not from Benin, and those marriages had failed, I thought to myself, why not try someone from Benin? But my work was cut out for me because Evelyn was tough to get. She was a born-again Christian who was committed to church activities. Each time I tried to get close to her and strike a conversation, she would preach to me about the need to give my life to Jesus. It was frustrating. Evelyn was perhaps aware of my reputation as a young, bubbly man about town. Despite my challenges, the truth is that I still knew her to have fun, never missed any party, and had developed a smoking habit from my days at sea. Smoking was such a part of me that I had a roll of cigarettes in my house, a roll in my car, and another in my office. All my life, I've never been one to give up easily, and I desperately wanted Evelyn, despite our constant preaching and our contrasting lifestyle. One day, I suggested that she should spend the weekend with me at my place. She said she could not because she had to go to church that evening. I asked if I could pick her up after service, and she agreed. The service was to close by 8 p.m. About a quarter to 8 p.m., I had already arrived at the Presidential Hotel where the service was holding, in the cinema hall. When I entered the hall, I took the first seat right by the door because I did not want anyone in the church to notice me. While I hid there, I kept stretching my neck, trying to spot where Evelyn was seated so I could easily intercept her when she stepped out after service. As I sat in the corner, a man, apparently the pastor, was at the pulpit preaching. Initially, I had no mind to what he was saying until I was hit by a compelling nudge to listen to the preacher. In split seconds, my attention became fixed on the preacher, and it was as if he was x-raying my life. Did anyone tell this man about me? I knew that was impossible because Evelyn did not know that much about me. I did not know what was going on, but every word from the preacher pierced my heart. When he finished preaching, he made an altar call for those who wanted to surrender their lives to Christ. Till today, I do not know when or how I got to the front. The only thing I recall is that when the preacher told us to open our eyes, I saw myself standing with my hands raised and tears flowing freely down my face as I wept profusely. Then I noticed I was not alone. Some other people from the congregation has also responded to the altar call. From hiding in a corner for fear of being seen because I was popular around town, I was now in the full glare of everyone. I was also at that moment that evening realized I was at the service. I should have felt embarrassed, judging by my reputation. But on the contrary, I felt terrific. Until now, I do not know how it all happened. That was how I got born again in July 1991. The pastor's name, as I would later know, was Reverend Adamson Aromagbe, founder of the Rock Word Church. At that service, Evelyn congratulated me and said we could go, but she meant her place, not mine. She was in the company of friends, so they all entered my car, and we headed straight to the University of Port Harcourt, Uniport, where they were students. I did not utter a word throughout the ride because it felt like I was in a trance. When we arrived at the university, the ladies alighted from the car, ready to step into their hostel. But Evelyn was seriously unsettled by my complete silence. On noticing her countenance, I tried to lighten the mood in a bit and eventually said, "I'll see you in church on Sunday," and drove off, heading straight home. When I got home, I woke my cook up and instructed him to throw out every ashtray in the house. By the next day, in 24 hours, the news had gone wrong. Guess what? Greg don't born again, oh. Greg don't born again, oh. Emptying of a vessel. Well, in case you are wondering, I never did get heavily as I desired. It turned out that she was only in my life to steer my spiritual path in a different direction. Sometimes in 1992, I would not know if it was in a trance or a vision, but I heard a voice say to me, "I am going to empty you and start a new thing in you." I never understood what it meant. My mind went to my spiritual life, but I never talked about it to anyone. Church activities became my focus. I began to attend church programs regularly to fill in my time and not give rooms for distraction. Interestingly, when news went around town that I had become born again, it was big, and people would call to tease me about it. Some people, both men and women, began coming to the church to confirm if it was true, and in the process, many of them became born again. I was in sequel of evangelism because I had turned away from my old life. But make no mistake about it, I did not become a saint overnight in terms of morals. I still struggled with my weaknesses and was in no way perfect. I had my challenges with women and fell for temptations now and then. Still, I would invite and take them to church, and we would pull each other up again. That was when I began to appreciate that God does not condemn anybody. He is in the business of cleaning you up as long as you stay with Him. More than half the time, when we have fallen, we think God is angry and that He turns His back on us or does not want to see us. But God is not like that. As long as you are willing to keep your focus on Him, get up, dust yourself, and keep going, He will build up a spiritual man in you and make you in His image. In 1991, when I got born again, my businesses was doing extremely well. Stars had a fleet of 4 river tugs and 8 barges, all working for share. The entire fleet was fully owned, and there was no debt to pay on the acquisition. From the first tug and 3 barges, which I brought from Chief Mumuni, I grew the fleet by plowing back the proceeds from ironing out the crafts. Our monthly revenue was average about 1 million naira, and I was tithing 100,000 to the church monthly as I got the importance of this command by God. In 1992, Chair informed me that they will be coming out with a tender for complete renewal of their fleet of tugs and barges, and that as a strong player, Stars was expected to put in a good bid in the tender. Armed with that information, I knew that I needed to source a company that I could work with for the design and construction of modern tugs and barges to meet the requirements of this upcoming tender. I jetted out of the country to Holland to meet with Riemen shipyard in Gorinchem to discuss the project. Riemen was and still is a leading player in shipbuilding worldwide. After fruitful deliberations with them, they informed me of a catamaran 95-seater passenger carrier they had for sale and asked if I could find a buyer in Nigeria. Furnished with the boat specification, I returned to Nigeria. On my return, I began to think of anyone that would need a catamaran boat. A unique feature of this type of boat is its wide beam and the low draft, which makes them useful in navigating shallow waters. From my survey work, which was still ongoing, at the time I got to know that because of the shallow approaches to the Mobi operational base, Kwaibo, terminal ships of conventional hulls with their deep draft could not be used to transport personnel in and out of Kwaibo. The result of this was that Mobi left with no option but to charter helicopter at huge cost for crew change of their personnel working in their offshore platform and rigs. An idea struck me that the Dama catamaran boats could prove a more economical alternative for their crew change. Soon, I sent a proposal to Mobi, and after a couple of meetings, a 3-year contract for the provision of catamaran boats was signed with Mobi and my company. The value of the contract was $3.3 million plus dollars, 11 million naira. This was a great opportunity I needed to see through to the end. I returned to Holland to negotiate the purchase of the catamaran boats, armed with a contract. A deal was struck. I returned to Nigeria to source for financiers for the agreed purchase price of the boat, which was GWR 2.2 million. GWR was the Dutch currency at that time. After much effort, one of the new generation banks assured to provide 90% financing, but I needed to bring in equity of 10%, which amounted to GWR 220,000 After this time, there was yet another oil glut globally, and with the attendant crash in oil price, Shell had laid off about 80% of my fleet without a contract, and the business looked gloomy. It made sense for me to sell off my tugs and barges to raise the equity I needed for the bank to finance the catamaran boat. The new Mobi contract will launch me into offshore vessel provision, away from the tugs and barges, which mainly operated in the swamp and their attendant challenges. I soon got a buyer in GWR, Nigeria Limited, raised the required GWR 220,000, paid it to the bank as my equity, and awaited the bank to come up with a 90% to pay for the boat in Holland. This became the beginning of an unbelievable experience that cost me all I had built up in business since 1966. On getting my equity, the bank immediately paid it to the catamaran boat owners in the name of CPC in Holland, with a promise to send them the 90% before the stipulated date in the purchase agreement. The date came and passed without the bank being able to raise the money. After several demands for payment from the owner, nothing happened up until as I wrote this memoir. The owner took me to arbitration in London, won the arbitration, which barely lasted 10 minutes, and I lost my equity and the boat to CPC. I tried to negotiate that we jointly executed the contract with Mobi, but CPC was not disposed to that. I returned to Nigeria feeling empty. I was back to ground zero. I had lost my entire fleet, equity, and of course, the contract with Mobi was cancelled, since there were no more boats. Where was I to start from? It was a strong reminder and rehash of my experience in 1986 when I lost my job with Ocean Inchcape. Nevertheless, I took consolation from the fact that this situation, as the Ocean Inchcape, was due to no fault of mine. I believed that a corporate entity like the bank would stand by their commitment. I did not imagine that this kind of disappointment would come from a bank. I considered what option I was left with. Go to court, So, on getting my equity, the bank immediately paid it to the catamaran boat owner in the name of CPC in Holland, with a promise to send them the 90% before the stipulated date. Agreement in the purchase. The date came and passed, and without the bank being able to raise the money after several demands from the payment, the owners took me to arbitration in London. What would, besides, I did not have a dime in my name. I was angry with the world. I was angry with God for letting this happen to me, a born-again child of His. From tithing a month to nothing, I went into depression. That was the point. Held my mind to recall what he said after emptying me all over. I was angry the more and asked God, how can you empty me? I was doing, look at where I am. Does not answer you when you are in the state of mind, because you are not seeing where God, He, is taking you and how He wants you to get there. State of mind cannot receive. His ways are beyond human comprehension. Still, was not during that period, as the classification societies began to regularly engage my services to carry out surveys and inspection in Lagos, Warri, Port Harcourt, and Calabar on their behalf. It was a job I did somewhat reluctantly due to my dissatisfaction with my state affairs. But whenever I got their call, I would get on the next available public transport and do the surveys. The society paid me in sterling and remitted into my NatWest bank account in London. I would then take part of that money and convert it to Naira. Even though I thought I was down and out in my mind, I was surviving in reality. With hindsight, I realized that God graciously provided an oasis in that financial wilderness, just like He used the raven to feed Elijah in the wilderness. The classification societies were the raven He used to meet my needs at that critical point. But I saw things differently there. Those around me never knew I was falling into depression because I still moved about normally and looked well. I had no capital to start a business for 6 months, but God sustained me through the surveys and inspection. And as a result, I built healthy balance in the UK. Nevertheless, angry with God at the downturn in my life. Man is a spirit. He has a soul and lives in a body. Yet, all these three are always contending with one another. I felt that full weight of conflict. My mind kept going back to how I lived before I got born again. My body felt the pain of my self-denial and challenges, but my spirit was quiet because it communicated with the Spirit of God and knew where God was taking me. Things improved gradually. All my weekend and time, I was always in the office sorting out paper and proposals to keep busy. One Thursday, my admin manager, Ian of blessed memory, genuinely concerned about my welfare, invited me to a musical concert, Christy Bachelor. She felt I needed to take some time off, at least for that weekend. I promised to be at the concert, scheduled for the next day. After work the next day, I went home briefly and then left for FB at Read-A-Thon. Port Harcourt Christian musical concert. That Friday evening, I sat at the back because the hall was almost filled up when I got there. On the stage was a group of young people, and among them was Christy Bartel, a beautiful woman with a powerful singing voice. She was the lead vocalist. I was undoubtedly intrigued by Christy's voice and the entire performance. And being a 2-day concert, I was among the first arrivals the next day. I wanted a clear view, so I took a front seat. Ian, who had invited me, was also an early arrival on the second day. On seeing me, she expressed surprise at my coming for the second day. I told her I enjoyed myself the previous day. That's why I came back. She was glad I did and beamed with joy. The concert was beautiful. At the end of the program, Christy announced that the concert held bi-monthly. She requested that volunteers who would like to make financial pledges towards the next concert should indicate. Many people pledged their financial support and moved towards her at the stage to drop their pledges. I decided to support the next, but one concert, so I wrote on my card that my company would sponsor the same. I was out with the rest, trying to stretch my hand to get the card to her, when she said, "You, sir, over here, please." I was surprised. Why me? I went over to where she was and gave her my card and said, "God bless you. Enjoy the whole evening." I left the hall and went home. 2 months after, I attended the next concert. By the time, I had started to pray to God for a wife. Desperate to be third time lucky. Honestly, it was a confusing time because every woman that came along bore the resemblance of a potential wife. My case was not helped because I had naively thought that all church ladies were holy and heaven-bound. Sadly, I was to discover that I was wrong. I had thought the church was a heaven, and I had been on the impression that the sisters in there were coming around to help me grow in faith. Now, I never imagined some of them had other in mind. As time went on, I sought counseling and had to be more discerning in my relation with the ladies. Not long after the second concert that I attended, I was at my office at Reclamation Road office when my secretary brought me a visit feed by Christy Bartel. When I saw it, I jumped up and said, "Ah, this great woman of God came here." I told my secretary to tidy up my office and to ask Christy in quickly. I walked to the door to meet and welcome her as she stepped into my office. She had come to follow up on my pledge to sponsor the next concert. She looked smaller than she had looked on the stage and more beautiful than I had observed from afar. So we began to plan the concert. At that time, I did not consider myself eligible to to marry a woman like Christy, considering my worldly reputation, past escapades, divorces, children, and all. So, my mind never went in her direction, even in my prayers to God for a wife. But before long, a relationship developed between us. And after months of courtship, we got married in 1993. We had our first child in 1996, in 2000, the last one in 2007. We traveled outside the country a lot, often going on cruises to different parts of the world. Life was great. As a minister, she regularly went ministering in different places. From music, she ventured into motivational speaking, and things were going well. All my other children came under my roof and grew up with us until they left for higher institutions overseas. For the first time, I had a stable home for a long period. But something had happened earlier in our marriage that would later hurt that union. Sometimes in 1996, while my wife, Christy, was away in the US to have our first baby, a lady, Franca Aho, got pregnant for me. And in 1997, she had a child, Abigail Osarugwe, out of wedlock. I was sorry and apologized wholeheartedly to Christy. She said she forgave me, but it seems she never really got over it and had broken trust in our relationship. After all, she began to do things with impunity, like traveling for ministrations without informing me. She also held on to the conviction that I was seeing other women. A lack of trust and a total breakdown of communication. Somehow, both of us were no longer committed to the marriage anymore. I found myself seeking joy outside of the marriage, and things just generally deteriorated. One other thing was that after I reunited with my first child, Natasha, I will share more on this later, Christy did not get along well with her, and it was proving to be very problematic. Their issues were minor on the surface, bordering on cultural differences, but they were enough to affect their relationship badly. For instance, Christy was offended by the idea of Natasha calling her by her first name. She did not come out on time to say it. It was upsetting her, and when she did, I spoke to Natasha, who unfortunately was not willing to call her anything else. The more Christy demanded to be called mommy or auntie, the more Natasha insisted that Christy was neither her mom nor her aunt, and so she could not call her either. I tried to make things right with Christy, but to no avail. She would later move out of our home 3 different times. Twice, I went to plead with her to return, and she did. But the last time, she rented a house on another side of town, took her belongings, the car, and other things, and that was it. This happened while I was out of the country. When I came back from my trip, I reached out to her, but she said she was not interested anymore. 6 months later, she invited me to her birthday, and I did. She asked me to give a speech at the reception. I took the microphone and publicly apologized to her and told her to come back home. Unfortunately, she did not want to come back. Then, I decided that if the situation was not fixed within a year, I will move on with my life. Sadly, there was no resolution, and Christy never looked back. My current wife, Victoria Otaria Ogbefun, Neode, is 34 years old, and she comes from the Yala local government, Northern Cross River, near Ogoja. At 21, while in her first years as a student at the University of Calabar, studying environmental science, she became an orphan. Her mother has just given birth 6 months before passing. As a result, Victoria was left with 4 younger sisters to take care of. As a young, determined lady, she worked hard to fund her education and support her sisters. When I initially met her in Lagos, she was looking for a job opportunity because she had not been paid for 9 months where she had been working at that time, and things were complicated. As I listened to her story, I realized that the weight of responsibility on her was enormous. So I encouraged her to start a business, which I committed to supporting. Victoria, fashionable and pretty, has an interest in fashion designing, an area she exhibits many talents in. Taken to the council, she started a fashion designing business, and it has since been doing well. The meeting with Victoria initiated a relationship between us that gradually blossomed into marriage. On 1st of September 2018, our family head, the late Barrister Alfred Egobame, SAN, led a delegation from Benin to Ogoja for my traditional marriage with Victoria on the said date. My beautiful and young wife and I enjoyed a warm relationship. We are very close, we are friends, and we do things together. I'm grateful to God for giving me this joy after my tumultuous journey. She enjoys extensive acceptance from my family and friends, and she is always happy to make me a happier and young Greg. I am determined by the grace of God to make this marriage last for the rest of my life. Marital lessons. Marriage is a very delicate thing. Unlike in many other areas, a bad choice can leave you with irreparable emotions, psychological, and even financial damages. Young people are more independent these days and tend to arbitrarily decide who their spouses should be. When young people approach me for marriage advice, I often do not feel like I am the best person to counsel them. But I also understand that experience, good or bad, is usually the best teacher of lesson. While most parents are inclined to offer counsel quickly, I try to first of all evaluate the circumstances before giving any advice. Parents should be wise when giving counsel to their children regarding marital relationship, just like other areas of life. However, I do not believe that it is in the parent place to impose on the children the decision like who they should marry. It is better to get young people to think more about certain questions rather than impose decisions on them. Have you thought about how compatible you are? Have you checked her background? Have you talked about money with him? Do you share the same idea on faith and religion? Check your health status? These are the type of questions young people need to ponder on before getting married. Parents can help turn their children's attention to important issues to make or mar marital relationship. The approach is more of parental guidance than interference. Another important thing is that parents and other third parties should hands off and avoid interfering with their children's marriages once the wedding ceremony ends. With the benefit of hindsight, I realized my first wife, Cecilia, and I were childish by sticking to our guns and thinking that everything had to end. The truth is that we were both really in love with each other, and most of the unpleasant things that occurred did not originate from either of us, but from third parties. Unfortunately, we are both immature in handling the situation. If I were to ever be in that situation again, such an incident would not be enough for me to end the marriage. Chapter 11, My Children, Arrows in the Quiver. In many ways, they reflect who we are and what we represent. A man-child could be his greatest source of pride or the reason for his deepest shame. We respect titles like presidents, prime ministers, CEO, managing directors, and so on. But in reality, no title is as important as dad or mom. Parents shape the world. Well, at least my parents shaped my world. They taught me values that stayed with me all my life. Even when they did not teach me things through talking, I practiced many things I saw them do. Only my children can accurately assess how I have been as a father. Still, regardless of my shortcoming in that important area of life, I know I have always loved every one of my children very deeply and in a way that is difficult to articulate. I suspect that this is not peculiar to me. It is the story of the average parent out there. My children are no more kids. Most of them are adults who are successful in their fields. The story in this chapter, it is actually my story I am telling, what I have tried to do throughout this book, to show that my path was not always easy, that as humans we fail and succeed, we fall and rise. Nevertheless, we must constantly move on. Natasha. Growing up, Natasha never lacked anything except her father's presence and love. Because of her grandparents, she had the best of many things in life. With her mother Riemen, they provided all her needs and helped her to grow up happy. As she grew, however, she began to question her mom about her dad, but never got responses adequate to satisfy her curiosity. Renee had obviously moved on and closed the chapter of her life where my story was written. When Natasha got into the university at the age of 18, she began to look for her dad earnestly. I was in my office one day when my phone rang. It was a foreign number. I picked it up, and it was Professor Riemen on the line. I was shocked. She apologized for calling out of the blue and said she did not mean to intrude into my life. I felt a mixture of emotions on hearing her voice. Riemen wanted me to know that our daughter, Natasha, has been asking to know who her father was and where he was over time. Rene said she never wanted to go into details with Natasha because she did not know where I was anymore. Apparently, however, Natasha had gone on the internet and downloaded the profiles of the 3 people who bore Gregory Ogbefu and were Nigerians. Natasha showed the profile to her mom and asked, "Which of these is my dad?" Because Rain knew I was a mariner, she picked the mariner out of the 3. "That is your father. That is his surname. But don't contact him. He does not know you. I will contact him. If he wants to interact with you, he will ask me for your number and I will give it to him," Rain had told Natasha. Rain narrated everything to me over the phone. Within me was a deep sense of excitement and regret at the same time. I felt pain for Natasha, yet I felt love. She was the daughter I had abandoned, the one who never knew her father because she lacked the courage to confront the reality of her existence due to a broken heart. Without wasting a second, I called Natasha. She was at the time schooling at the University of Virginia. And of course, as could be excited, she was bearing her grandfather's surname. "My name is Gregory Ogbefu. I am your dad," I said to her over the phone. She asked, "What did you say?" And when I repeated who I was, she burst out crying and asked, "Where have you been?" I started crying too. After half an hour of emotional expressions, the phone call ended, and I immediately booked a flight for the next weekend to Richmond, USA. All through the following week, I could barely wait for the weekend. And when it finally came, the trip to Richmond took longer than other trips I had taken to the USA before then. On that flight, my mind replayed everything that happened from the time I met Rain over and over again. I had 1,001 questions unanswered. Natasha of the Charlottesville Airport, which is 8 miles north of Charlottesville in Abermale County, Virginia, eager to receive me. The moment I saw her, I looked at her forehead and eyes and knew that it was my daughter. We ran to each other and hugged. We spent the weekend together, talking day and night non-stop, trying to pack 19 years into 3 days. She was happy. I told her about my family, the children, and everything, and she fed me in with her stories and growing up. And in the university, I could not spoil her enough, as I took her shopping everywhere. By the time I connected with Natasha, she was in the university studying biological science. It was a preliminary course for medicine. I am not sure how she ended up choosing that career path, but during our very first few days together, I observed she has a very legal mind. You cannot say something without getting her getting you to justify your perspective and engaging you in a discussion. Much like me, she's a good talker and can hold her own. Every time we talk about biological sciences and medicine, I could not see a natural interest in her. After my visit, we rented a car and drove from Richmond to Boston with me at the steering wheel. The journey to Boston accorded us close to 6 hours of talking and laughing as we got to know each other more. We saw similarities in our mannerism and we bonded. At a gas station, we stopped for a cup of tea, got back into the car, and chatted all the way to Boston. Along the way, I asked if she wanted a doctor. I pointed to her that it seems she will make a better lawyer than a doctor. Surprisingly, she said law would have been her preferred option. But why are you trying to do what you don't like? I asked. I encouraged her to go for what she would like to study. Natasha phoned her mom, and I told her that it was my opinion and impression that Natasha should consider looking at a career in law because she has a natural gift in that area. And the mother, I felt proud to have been involved in something major in her life for the first time. After her first degree, Natasha went to Suffolk University in Boston, studied law, and got a master's degree in the same field. Years later, my other daughter, Bethany, got admission into Suffolk University, Boston. I accompanied her to help her settle in. Natasha was incredibly helpful and supportive as she aided Bethany in settling into her alma mater. So Bethany was in good hands. Afterwards, I've tried to visit the USA as often as possible to see Natasha and try to make up for the 19 years of being an absentee father. Of course, I could never make up for those lost years, but at least I hope Natasha has felt some love. Last summer, Victoria and I visited Natasha Kama, Natasha's husband, and their two children, Haya and Lena, in North Carolina. We speak every day and have weekend video calls with my granddaughters. Natasha and Kama are both successful lawyers. She's an attorney for Progress Software Corporation in Boston and works online from North Carolina. While Kama works for Duke Energy Corporation in North Carolina. Though Natasha loves Nigeria from visiting a couple of times, a few incidents have discouraged her from coming back. On one of her visits, she narrowly escaped a Chanjagin plane crash in Lagos. It was a terrible experience that left her badly shaken. Following that horrible experience in Lagos, she was flying Air France going to Paris. After the waiting time in Paris to connect to Boston, as they were in the aircraft getting ready to taxi, a bomb scare forced an evacuation. Since then, she had not come in this direction at all. Christopher. My first son came from my first wife, Cecilia, in 1983. He is my pride and joy. I named him Christopher Osasu Ogbefu. Christopher is brilliant, sharp, and charismatic. He was 2.5 years old when his mother and I parted ways. And 2.5 years later, after the divorce, I was given custody of himself and his sister, Iro. Before I was granted custody, and during the time of my separation from Cecilia, the children had been living with her. I put Christopher and Iro in Montessori International School in Port Harcourt. I always encouraged their mom to have access to them as much as she wanted, because I believe every child needs both parents to be emotionally balanced. For his secondary education, Christopher went to Igbinejo Education Center in Benin, the Ivy League of secondary schools at the time. It was when he went to Igbinejo that I began to notice some worrying traits in him. Things got so bad that a few times he was nearly expelled from the school. He began to move with peers who did not exactly influence him to be better than he was. Unfortunately and regrettably, His mother and I had different opinion about disciplining him. Let us say that Christopher viewed me as a bad parent and his mother as a supportive one. When I noticed that things were getting out of hand because the school kept calling my attention to his behavior, I considered moving Christopher and Iro out of Benin completely. So Lagos it was. Though Iro had no problem whatsoever in religion, I did not want them separated. Consequently, I put both of them in Christland College, Idimu, Lagos. Within 2 months of resuming at Christland, Christopher was locked up in the school cell as a discipline for some serious misdemeanor. Despite his behavioral misconduct, he was academically bright and held all the traits of a young man capable of things with his life. Fortunately, he finished from Christland and returned to Port Harcourt. After Christland, I asked Christopher what he would like to do next, and he said he wanted to be a marine engineer. I asked him some questions and spoke with him extensively about options in marine engineering. All the he applied to offered Christopher a degree program in marine engineering. I knew that going for the professional training option like I did because of market demand, but I was not going to impose anything on him. I still do not believe parents should impose career choices on children, but one can counsel and guide them. Incidentally, at that time, I was already a resource person at the Maritime Academy of Nigeria, Oron. That year, during their annual passing out event, I had presented a paper as usual. But I had to return to Port Harcourt for an important board meeting. This meant I could not be at the ceremonial passing out parade, but I wanted Christopher and Iro to witness it. So I got one of my expatriate staff at the shipyard to take them to Oron. They had a good time there. And later that night, Christopher told me he would like to go to the Maritime Academy, Oron. He had finally decided on the type of marine engineer he wants to be. So off he went to the Maritime Academy, Oron. Annually, the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company, LNNG, goes to Oron to screen, test, interview, and shortlist cadets from the academy for their training program. Successful cadets are given scholarship to Europe to continue their training. In the second year, LNNG gave Christopher a scholarship. He left for Gaslow College of Natural Studies in Gaslow, Scotland. We named the city of Gaslow College since 2010. To continue his maritime engineering studies. Unfortunately, while he was at the Maritime Academy, those unsavory character traits manifested again, but they were tamed largely by the paramilitary regime. At Gaslow, Christopher seemed more matured, and it looked like the academy had helped him develop discipline. I went to visit him a few times, and I was impressed by his comportment. But as much as it appears like the academy was molding him, Christopher was getting more and more involved in the Gaslow social life. He was rocking the city outside of the time at the academic. In the course of that, he got a Scottish girl in the family way and had a daughter. I did not mind that because it was his life. But I, as well as his sponsor, LNNG, knew that he needed to return to Nigeria with the requisite qualification he went there to acquire. Eventually, Christopher called to inform me that he had passed his examination. I was excited about the good news. The next step was for him to return to Nigeria. But unknown to me, he had not passed the examination as he claimed. The exam, if he had passed, would have earned him a second-class certificate of competency. When I realized he had been deceiving me, I was devastated. NNNG gave Christopher opportunities to go back repeatedly, but he did not want any of that, so he became an uncertified cadet officer. I insisted that he had to go and retake the examination, but he remained adamant. Meanwhile, reports had gotten to me that he was one of the best practical engineers at LNNG, confirming what I had always known. My son was brilliant. This inspired me to try all I could to persuade him to reconsider things. Still, he was bent on his ways, and sadly, after a while, LNNG had to let him go because of behaviors not tolerated by the organization and the industry, coupled with his inability to progress career-wise due to lack of qualification. It hurt me that Christopher has struggled to overcome his problem without success. Due to it, he has been unable to take advantage of many opportunities that have come his way. By now, he should be the Chief Operations Officer of my company and be getting ready to become the Chief Executive Officer. Unfortunately, this is not the case. It pains me that my first son, who has my blood running through his vein, finds it so difficult to locate his parts. I love him dearly, but I cannot make choices for him any longer. Only parents can understand how situations like this hurt. Nevertheless, I have not given up on him. Daily, I pray for him and keep telling him that it is never too late to get his life back. Of course, because the race is not for the swift or the battle for the strong, but for him that wills. It is the grace of God that makes the difference. I can never give up on any of my children. I will always hope for the best for them. Christ never gives up on any of us, so why should we give up on any? God never gives up on us, no matter our failing. Of having that mindset, I am constantly the slightest sign of hope when the prodigal son comes to himself. He said, I shall arise and go to my father. The father stood outside, waiting for the prodigal son to come home. When he saw him from afar, he ran to him and hugged him. The same thing applies to my son. Whenever he says, I will go to my father, I will be there waiting for him. And it does not have to be Greg Ogbefun waiting for him as a father. God will always be there waiting for him. Hiogama. My third child is Hiogama Blessing, Christopher's immediate younger sister. Hiro, as we call her for short, is special. From childhood, she has been academically exceptional and an athlete interested in sprinting. Exceptional behavior, and she excelled in all her exams in school. She always came home with a report of exceptional behaviors and traits of leadership. At age 17, she got admission into the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And I remember she cried a lot when I was leaving her there to return to Nigeria. Her tears broke my heart. It made me start crying too. I was wondering why I had to leave my little girl several thousands of miles away from Nigeria. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done. When I went visiting her after the first semester, she had performed excellently in the semester examination. When she told me I made the dean's list, I did not know what it meant since I never schooled in America. EO explained that it meant her scores were excellent. I was absolutely delighted and proud of her. I promised her that if she made the dean list again, I would travel to America and buy her a brand new car of her choice. Daddy, start saving your money, she advised me in excitement. She was confident of getting into the dean list again. At her next attempt, Hero did not make the dean list. She made the national dean list. She did not only make the dean list, she made the national dean list. Hero did. On hearing that news, I got on a plane to America and brought her a brand new Nissan Altima, which was what she wanted. Some people complained that I was spoiling her, but I told them I was prepared to spoil her as long as she was prepared to spoil me with good results. Hero must have taken the dance gene direct from me, as she likes dancing a lot too. In Massachusetts, she and her friends formed a dance troupe in the school, and people will invite them to events to dance Makosa and the likes. The troupe always got paid for their dance performances. At the same time, Hero served in the pubs to earn some money besides her regular allowances from me. She was supposed to be studying medicine, perhaps because her mom was a medical doctor, and I was really excited that she was going on that path. In those days, parents wanted to have children studying engineering or medicine. The American government has an exchange program where they send students from America to similar institutions in other countries, so long as they are prepared to fund part of the fees. Based on academic performance, Iho was choosing to go for the exchange program for medical students in Australia. It was for about 4 weeks. Iho attended the program and returned to the USA with some exposure. In her second year in Massachusetts, we realized it was smarter to own a house in Boston than staying in hotels each time we visited as a family. We therefore got an agent, paid some deposits, and raised a mortgage. Iho, at the age of 19, handled the entire transaction from the purchase of the property. She was already showing signs of being abstruse with money and business. It is a big, beautiful house on the outskirts of Boston in a place called Broxton suburb. We still own the place, and every time we go to the USA, we stay there. My daughter, Osayame Stephanie, the last girl, was born in Brockton. Iho showed any signs of maturity, wisdom, and a high sense of responsibility to herself and the family. In her third year, I visited her, and she told me she wanted to take me out for dinner. I was excited. She took me to a fancy and posh restaurant where I should mention that she only picked the restaurant. I did the paying. The ambience and menu were nice, and we had a nice time eating. When it was time for dessert, she said to me with a serious look on her face, "Daddy, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I don't want to be a medical doctor anymore. I don't want to study medicine anymore." I was stunned. "Dear," I was already boasting that my daughter will soon be graduating as a medical doctor, and then she's no longer interested in medicine. And she explained how she never really liked it, how she could not stand the sight of blood, and a million other reasons. So what do you want to do next? I asked. And next words were worst. That threw me off balance. I was left with a blank expression on my face. Let us say that the rest of the meal did not taste so well. After then, we left for home. And not much was said afterwards. She did go on to graduate in biology and psychology, returned to Nigeria, and served a mandatory National Youth Service Program in Abuja, Nigeria. But my dream of Hero becoming a medical doctor would remain a mere dream. While she was in Boston, Hero got involved in selling Mary Kay cosmetic products. She talked me into investing in her business, and I eventually put some money into it. We are still waiting for the return of that investment till today. Once in a while, I will remind her and ask her, where is my Mary Kay product money? And you cannot pay me the dividends. Give me my capital. And she would laugh and say, Daddy, don't worry. I will pay you someday. By the time she finished NYSC, Hero had gotten admission into Brunel University, London, to do her master's in public health and in public health administration. I was happy about that and paid for the 2-year course. Halfway through it, she called me to tell me she had incorporated a new business. I said there was no problem, as long as she would not be asking me for money, as she did for the Mary Kay business. After that, she never spoke to me again about the new business anymore. Unknown to me, it was a natural hair product line which she was already manufacturing in California. By the time she returned to Nigeria, she had built up a clientele that it became inevitable for her to give the business full-time attention. She did not need a job, she was not looking for one. At first, I had wondered how public health was going to put food on her table. I was bothered. I would later realize that he had other plans when she came to Port Harcourt. She said to me, Daddy, thank you for your investment in my education. This is your master's certificate. You paid for it, but I want to go into business now. She had everything planned, it seemed. Hero showed me different plans and ideas. I was surprised because she didn't go to it. I listened to her presentation with rapt attention. It all sounded good, so I gave her my support and told her to go out there and make it happen. In Lagos, she set up a health product shop at Ogudu Road, employing some staff and importing her product. She would later get government authorization for product line, food and drug. I went to a supermarket in Lagos and saw her product on the shelf. That was when it dawned on me that she was really serious about the business and was on top of things. During the same period, the first edition of the entrepreneurship reality TV show called The Next Titan came up. The show was set up to select 50 young people from all over Nigeria and bring them together for business mentoring. Hero applied and was selected as part of the 50 in that pioneer education. As a family,